Our next speaker is Heather Schmidt. Heather Schmidt is the Sustainability Manager for New Seasons Market. Many of you, I'm sure, are familiar with New Seasons. She manages the comprehensive sustainability program for the market, and as many of you know, the locally based New Seasons is widely recognized for cutting-edge sustainable practices, employee equity, and social responsibility. Heather has traveled to 40 countries, such a great fit for World Food Travel Association, and she's an artist and a published writer. Her question is, how do we preserve the pleasure of our experiences and share our abundance? Please help me welcome Heather Schmidt for her talk, Enough to Go Around, Preventing Waste and Enjoying What We Have.
Good afternoon, everyone. Can you hear me okay? Great. Well, I love food. And I work for a local grocery whose mission is good food and service to the community. And part of my focus at work is prevention of food waste. And I've come to understand through this that food waste is connected to climate change, food insecurity, and poverty. And I've also come to believe that there's something deeper going on, and that these global issues that have an impact are also connected to us on a personal level. But as I was thinking through this talk, I kept going back to myself and how I'm connected to this. And I came to believe that getting in touch with our relationship to food and food waste then is really important to make change, particularly in preventing food waste. So I'm actually going to start by talking to you about some of the observations that I made about myself, and then I'm going to kind of move into some of the bigger context. So as I was preparing for this talk, I started looking in my refrigerator and started paying attention to the food that was coming into my household and then being composted. And I was doing this kind of on a different level than I normally do, which, you know, I'm already fairly aware of this, but I actually was surprised by what I found. First of all, I think that there's a psychology to food waste, much like there's a psychology to what we eat and how much we eat. And so I want to just tell you, there are three sort of major observations that I made. First of all, I waste more food than I thought I did. So that was a big one. I thought I was a better person than I am around that. And the other sort of disconnect that I found was that there's a disconnect between what I thought that I did and what I actually do. So I found that I was wasting less than the average American, but I wanted to know why I was wasting at all. All right, so my second observation is that I found that food waste is not rational. That I could come up with a lot of different reasons and explanations for my own food waste, how it happened that banana rotted. But it didn't really hold up. And I'm actually going to give you the example of the bananas. This is real life. I just noticed I had a pattern of letting bananas go to waste. And it didn't make a lot of sense. So here's the fruit bowl, and the bananas come in, and they sit there, and they get brown, and they go out into the compost. And I think, you know, a couple of months ago, I might have said, Heather, why are you wasting bananas? And then it starts to get into this almost like a moral argument with yourself that you can't possibly win. So this time, I just simply asked why I was buying bananas. If they keep going to waste and I'm not eating them, why am I buying them? And what I realized is that there was this thing going on where I thought I should be eating bananas. I don't know why. Therefore, I'm buying them, and yet I'm not eating them. So there was that kind of what I should be doing, what I want to be doing, this healthy eating habit, versus sometimes what I'm actually doing. And then the last observation is kind of hard to pin down, and I think it's because it is tied to other things that are kind of hard to pin down, like childhood and culture and the way we feel about our bodies and time, subconscious stuff, right, that we can't really quite get and understand. And so let me give you a little context. I grew up poor and I was hungry a lot, and I didn't have good food choices. So now in my life where I'm at, I have tons of choices, lots of really healthy options, lots of awareness, access to really whatever I want. And so based on then how I grew up and how I didn't have a lot of options and they weren't really good ones, and now I've got this just huge amount of privilege and bounty, this was what I was surprised to find, that I am fickle. And by fickle, I don't mean whether or not I like mushrooms or how I want my eggs cooked. I'm talking about how often I don't want to eat what I have, when what I have is generous and good. So I'm talking about that experience of opening the refrigerator or the cabinet and it's just simply not wanting it, even if it's really good stuff, even if it's organic. And so I found that part of my personality is that I'm prone to whims, spontaneous changes of the mind. I quite like it. It's not always great for the food. And so here's an example of something that happens to me. On the weekend, I catch up on sleep. I've had 2 days off. I am filled with hope. Really, it always comes back. On Saturday and Sunday, it comes back. And I start thinking about how I want to live my life and how I want the week to unfold. And I make a shopping list. And I often do that on Sunday, and I often shop on Sunday. And sometimes I'll make foods up on Sunday that I think I'm going to eat for the rest of the week, too. Because, see, this makes sense, right? I'm going to eat this for the rest of the week. On Sunday, I think that's what's going to happen. So I buy cauliflower because I think I should be eating cauliflower because cauliflower is good for me. It's a good idea. And on Sunday, when I'm filled with hope, I am buying into these good ideas. So I buy the cauliflower. I want a kale salad. I make a really great fresh kale salad and some baked tofu, and there's my meal. Here's the thing, though. Come Monday or Tuesday, maybe I've got those things as leftovers, I don't want it anymore. And that cauliflower doesn't sound very good anymore. And in fact, I think I need a fruity cocktail. And I think I need some fried food with some nice little dipping options. And so I think I need to head to a happy hour. And the vegetables will keep. And so I tell myself, you can eat the vegetables the next day. And sometimes I do eat the vegetables the next day. And sometimes I don't. And so that's kind of the pattern. And so I asked some friends, I wanted to know if other people experience this. And I asked some friends if this happened to them or why they think they waste food. And they came up with a lot of the same things, right? And a lot of the stuff, there's been research done about how people waste food. And it's, not planning meals well enough, buying things at random, not using the freezer, so you make things and they're leftovers, and that's the big one, the lost leftovers that get in the fridge, deep in the refrigerator. Many of us don't have a super organized refrigerator. We forget about them, then we're scared to eat them. We don't know how long it's been in there. Even if there's a label, we don't know what it means. The sell-by, the use-by dates are confusing to most of us. I even work at a grocery store and it's confusing. So, right? So these are some of the reasons that people give. But one of these friends said something that I really, really liked. He said, we never waste good food. No, we never waste bad food. Sorry, this is a big one. We never waste bad food, we waste good food. He said, no one lets Cheetos go stale. And I thought that made so much sense. Because a lot of what this is, at least for me, is about this kind of struggle that I have about the way I want to live my life and the way that I want to eat, and then sometimes the way I'm actually living my life and the way I'm actually eating. And we don't always tie food waste into that, what's happening there, but it is connected. It's a result, right? Or it's the sort of downspout of what's happening. And here's the thing, no one wants to waste food. No one wants to waste money either. It's not the result of deliberate action. We are not at our shopping carts going through the grocery store saying, this looks really good, I'll eat this one. This looks really good, I'll waste this one. This one looks good, I'll eat this one. This one looks good, I'll waste this one, right? When we're there and we're grocery shopping, our intention is pure. We're buying food that we need for us, our families, and we plan to eat it. And our experiences around this might be different, might be the same, I don't know if you're experiencing what I'm experiencing. But there's some commonality, and the commonality is that we share the same planet. And the other commonality is that we need food for our basic needs, but also for fulfillment. We all eat, and we all waste food. Some of it's unavoidable. But the other commonality that we all share in is this one fact, and that is that too many people don't have enough food. And some of us have so much food that we waste it on a daily basis. Okay, here's some good news. The good news is that we have control over this. We can actually make changes in our own habits, in our own households, and we can work toward avoiding unnecessary food waste. Some of us here also work within the food industry, food production, food service, right? Various areas along the supply chain, and we also can influence in that sort of arena as well. But regardless, we're all feeding ourselves, so we have that power. All right, I need to go into this other stuff and tell you kind of how bad it is. So here's where the data comes in. The National Resources Defense Council, great paper. They put out a white paper in August of last year. So a lot of the data that I'm about to give you comes from that paper. They did a really nice job. 1/3 of all food globally is wasted. So 1/3. And what that means is that 1/3 of all food that was intended to be eaten, so it was planted and harvested and grown and transported and distributed, etc. 1/3 of it globally is wasted, and it amounts to about 1.3 billion tons. So in the United States, 40% of food, again, food that has been intended to be eaten, it's edible food, 40% is wasted along the supply chain. So anywhere from the beginning of production to the end with the consumer. In the household alone, so in an American household, 25% of food that has been purchased to be eaten is wasted. So if you think back to that scenario of going through the grocery store, right? So literally every 3 items, the 4th is wasted on average in the American household. There's a lot of energy and water that goes into producing food. And some of us that haven't done that part of our food production don't necessarily know that, but there's a lot of embedded energy and water. From farm to plate, 10% of the total U.S. energy goes into food production, 10% just into food production. 50% of the land is used for food production, and 80% of all fresh water consumed. So when we waste food, we waste all the heart, too, that went into making that food, right? But we waste all of this embedded energy. The impact, right, upstream is 30 times greater than downstream. But what's interesting, and a lot of us here in Portland do this, and I'm one of them. We get so focused on this downstream, right? I'm composting, pat on the back, I'm recycling, pat on the back. But the thing is we need to move upstream and prevent it from even getting to the compost bin. Because when we're composting something, it's already been wasted. We're managing what has been wasted. And in the United States, we waste more vegetables than we do meat, but the greenhouse gas impact of meat is much greater. Think about a portion of your hamburger versus a portion of your carrot, and what goes into producing either one of them. So wasting that meat has a much greater impact. Uneaten meat accounts for 20% of meat's greenhouse gas emissions. Americans eat a lot of meat, 37 million tons of meat annually. So again, there's a big impact with the loss there. So I want to talk about what happens when food is wasted, because again, here in this region and the Pacific Northwest, and there's a lot of places across the country that are starting to do more commercial composting. And so I want to tell you the bad news, that most people aren't composting the food waste. In fact, the vast majority of food waste goes to a landfill. And we talk a lot about plastics and how evil plastics are, and I'm sure that there's a lot that we can do around reducing plastics, but food waste is the single largest component sent to landfills. So think about it, the food that we produce to eat is the single largest component that is sitting in the landfill. And it's not innocent in the landfill, because what happens is it actually gives off methane. That's what happens when food rots in a landfill, is it gives off methane. Methane is a greenhouse gas, but it's the deadliest greenhouse gas. So 21 times deadlier than carbon dioxide. So it has a huge impact on climate change. And climate change also impacts agriculture. And there's this cyclical effect. Only 3% of food along the supply chain is composted. So again, a lot of us are quite privileged to live in a place where that's available. I'm from Ohio, and things are starting to change in that region, but I mean, when I came here, I was one of the people that got the you made a mistake sticker on your recycling bin because I didn't know how to do it, right? So some of us get pretty entrenched into this, everybody's composting, but really across the country, only 3% of the food loss across the supply chain is actually being composted, and only 10% is recovered for donation. There's a cost there, $250 billion each year globally. For a household, an American household of 4, it can be up to and over $2,000 a year. So I want to talk just a little bit about where this is and then kind of move into some of the things that we can do to make change. I do call food waste a modern epidemic. And one of the reasons that even saying modern, is because we are wasting food in this country at a much higher rate than we ever did. So since 1974, there was a 50% rise. There's been a 50% rise in food waste. But think about the time period. So 1974, this is in my lifetime, we've increased the food waste by 50%. In the last 100 years, in the 20th century, we increased population by 4.5 billion people. We also increased demand so that people are actually consuming more individually than they ever have before. This is the one that really interests me. The actual size of our plates grew. So the plate you're eating off today is approximately 36% larger than the plates that people ate off of before 1960. There was an increase in that plate size. There's been an increase just in calories in a common food item like a piece of pizza. A piece of pizza has grown by 70% in calories alone. So you've got a portion increase. You've got a greater demand due to population growth. We've added more people to the planet, and we're supposed to add another 4 billion by the end of this century or sooner. And we've also got, we've seen the evidence of it, a warming planet, and it does affect. It affects our food systems. And then we've also seen this increase in food waste. So at a time when we need more food, we're wasting it. The UN forecasts that food production needs to increase by 70% by 2050 just to meet global demand. So that's tough. That's a tough order, right? Which is also why I'm here talking about this, because I really think that focusing on food waste prevention can have a big impact. Because how else are we going to meet that demand? And one way to meet that demand is to decrease the waste. If we prevent and reduce food waste, we alleviate pressures on that food production, right? We directly reduce greenhouse gas emissions. We save money, resources, and we literally allow for more food to go around. Reducing food loss by just 15% in this country would feed 25 million Americans every year. So right now, today, 1 in 6 people in the United States don't have enough food to eat. But a 15% decrease in the loss, in other words, of food loss anywhere along the supply chain, could feed 25 million Americans. I don't know if that sounds like a lot to you or not. 15% kind of, it sounds like kind of a lot to me. But I was really encouraged when I learned about a program that was started in the UK that is actually starting to kind of be mimicked and growing here in the United States and other countries. The UK's program is called Love Food, Hate Waste, and I really encourage you to check that out. In 5 years of implementing their program, which by the way is a public education campaign, teaming up retailers and other people in food production, So in 5 years, they actually saw an 18% decrease in food waste. So I think it's really significant. We know that it works. We know that it can be done. We know that we can do it in this country. We know we have the resources to do it. And again, I go back to each of us individually, and this is part of why I've put myself on this challenge. I couldn't come up here and talk to you about this without trying to examine myself. And here's what I know. It's never, for me, it's never not going to be something that I do, right? Just like I want to eat healthy and I want to exercise, I have to pay attention to my food waste because it's always going to be an ongoing, imperfect situation. So I talked kind of about some of those things that might be reasons why we waste food. So some of the things that we can do, right, to try to decrease our food waste is planning meals. But the other thing that I learned about myself is try to plan the meal, though, in a way that actually fits your lifestyle and your family, and try to be real with yourself, because sometimes we're not always being honest with ourselves about our own habits. Smaller portions at restaurants, mini loaves of breads at grocery stores, I'm a big fan of. I think that we want pleasure and we want joy, and we want the pleasure of food and the joy that comes with company and family and the experience of being filled, and that we want to sustain ourselves. But that we also want more than to not just be hungry. That fundamentally we really want to share in the experience, that we do want to ensure that there's enough to go around, that we simply don't want to feed ourselves, but that we want to be fed. So with that, I'm calling for a shift. To eat, to share it, to love it, to give thanks, to enjoy what you have, and to make sure there's enough to go around. Thank you.
Oh, can you stay for the Q&A?
Oh, I'm sorry.
It's okay.
I forgot about that.
Yeah, it's okay. You're not done yet.
Well, I'm afraid I gave too many statistics.
Oh, not really at all. Let's get the ball rolling here. I saw a hand. Can we? Oh,
are we on?
Another
Okay.
hand after that.
Thank you. Great presentation, by the way.
Thank you.
I think I really like what you had to say about the menu planning. I think that's a big component. But I wonder if there's a gap in our whole farm-to-table model, and that gap is the kitchen. I think there's a huge disconnect sometimes with us who consider ourselves foodies, who like all aspects of food and forget that the majority of people still only care about eating it. And I think that most people don't know what to do with that good food that they know they're supposed to eat. How would you address that? How can we better educate the next generation of a people that parents didn't cook?
Are you saying at the restaurant what to do with the leftovers, or what to do in your own household?
No, I'm saying that because I think most people can't afford to go out and eat healthy in a restaurant every night of the week. Or so their option is either eat unhealthy at home because they don't know any better. How can we bridge that gap?
To learn how to preserve food, to learn how to can, to learn how to cook. I mean, you can learn how to kill an animal and break the carcass down, and then learn what to do with it after that. So there's opportunities. They're not the same everywhere. I think that there are certain regions where there's access to more information than other people might have. Most of us are connected into the internet. I look at recipes. Sometimes I just need inspiration. To be quite honest, I might know how to make something, but I'm just tired of eating it, right? I get in these ruts. And so I look at, one of my favorites is foodgawker.com. And so I've got a bunch of celery. I don't know what the heck to do with it. I thought I wanted all this celery, so then I put in celery and I come up with 20 recipes of what to do with celery. So sometimes it's that kind of thing, but I don't know what's going to work best for everyone.
Okay. Did I see another hand here? Yeah. Can you pass the mic? Thanks.
Hi. So completely agree with the whole concept of not wanting to waste our food. I'm having trouble understanding how, if I do better menu planning and buy better and cook better, how does that food actually go to feed the hungry people? How does my saving waste actually translate to, where's the connection in the food chain that it helps the people who need it?
I think a lot of, on an individual level, it might be much more indirect, particularly if you're not tied into that, to the industry that brings food to the plate. Whereas I actually personally have a couple of different touch points. So on a personal individual level, if in fact any of us are wasting 25%, which is the average from this new research, that has actually quite a big impact on food production. So if we are purchasing it and wasting it, then it actually was not able to, then it taxed even the production of it. Does that make sense? We might be commercially composting our food here, but in most of the country they're not. And so that literally has direct impact on greenhouse gas emissions. So I know it's a little bit to get your arms around, believe me. I would completely agree that it's hard to understand the direct and the indirect impacts. Those of us that are in the food industry, though, I think that we probably have more power than we realize to actually make those kinds of changes. I mean, even on the level of food donations, at that point, yes, we've moved past the prevention. Now we've got excess food. But donating is better than composting it. Not every grocery store that can do so is donating food. Not every restaurant is doing so. Teaming up with food bank organizations is a big way to do that. You know, even serving smaller portions and more options at restaurants can be helpful.
Hey, Heather Schmidt. Oh, we have, okay, all right, one more, but then we've got to wrap it up.
I have the mic, so. My name's
We can turn that mic off, actually. I know some people, but go ahead.
my name's Emily, and I'm with Urban Gleaners. Heather, I'd love to actually meet you in person after this. But I was curious, you talked about the supply chain and how much food is lost from the farm literally to the grocery store. And I'm wondering if New Seasons, or if you are aware of movements to especially change some of these sell-by dates or change the systems around that so we can understand what it means when there's a weird little code on your can of tomatoes that doesn't even seem to resemble a year, and what's happening with that to make us waste less food in the long run.
One difference is that something that's shelf-stable, like canned food or boxed food or something like that, the manufacturer puts a date on there. And it's really what they're doing is they're trying to identify the best quality. If you should eat this in this amount of time, or it's best before, et cetera, because of the quality of that food, right? And then there are also stickers that the grocery might put on ourselves, like New Seasons, let's say in the grab-and-go case. So there's some potato salad, and we've put it into a clamshell container, and it's ready for you to take out. And I agree that in and of itself can be confusing. We've actually had this discussion internally about how to make it easier to understand and friendlier to the consumer, because to be frank, that sticker that we put on there, the sell-by date, is really, it's for us, it's not for you. And so I am having that discussion about how can we shift it to the consumer to make it actual information that's useful to eat, basically to eat by this particular date.